What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a reaction to the Who classic Quadrophenia, brought to us by our friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Arnie. Thank you, Arnie. Really appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. Check out the Patreon link below if you'd like to support us in any way. It is much appreciated. There'll also be a link on the end screen when this video is over. But guys, this video is going to be long, right? This album is 81 minutes long. And as if you watch this channel, I can imagine, I got a ton of research. I have wanted to do this album for a few years, but here's what I understood, right? Quadrophenia, as we're going to get into it, it unfolds a story, right? A rock opera, whatever you want to call it. And to listen to the album, you've got to understand the story. So I've never listened to the album because I never wanted to dig into the story. Now, my partner in crime, Trey, I talked to him about this. He said he listened to this album last year and actually followed through on Wikipedia, like song by song, to check out what it's about. But guess what? You're not going to have to do that because I'm going to give you a background on the album. Then we're going to go in through song by song and talk about what they mean. And we're going to come out the other side, understand this album better, whether you know this album already or whether it's going to be your first time like me. So let's just jump into the research. Here we go. It was their 6th studio album, released as a double album in October of 1973. It's their 3rd rock opera, the 2 previous being A Quick One While He's Away and, of course, Tommy. Set in London and Brighton in 1965, the story follows a young mod named Jimmy in his search for self-worth and importance. It's the only Who album entirely composed by Pete Townshend. The group started work on the album in 1972, trying to follow up Tommy and Who's Next, which is an album review we did way early in the history of the channel. Who's Next, one of my top 10 albums of all time, both of which had achieved substantial critical and commercial success. Recording was delayed while bassist John Entwistle and singer Roger Daltrey recorded solo albums, and drummer Keith Moon worked on films. Because a new studio was not finished in time, they were actually trying to build a studio to do this album, and they didn't get it done in time. They had to use the great Ronnie Lane's mobile studio. The album makes significant use of Townshend's multi-track synths and sound effects, as well as Entwistle's layered horn parts, in addition to the group's typical playing styles, especially from Keith Moon. Relationships between the group and manager Kit Lambert broke down irretrievably during recording, and Lambert had left the band's service by the time the album was released. He took a bunch of money from them, allegedly, so that was kind of the deal there. Quadrophenia was released to positive reception in both the UK and the US. The album made a positive impact on the mod revival movement of the late 1970s, which the great Paul Weller and the Jam we'll talk about. We got 3 of their albums up, and that's kind of what he first made me aware of the mod movement. And the resulting 1979 film adaptation was successful. So I'm not really going to get into the film much, but there was a film all the way in 1979, a new soundtrack for it, and all that good stuff. So let's talk about the plot before we get into it, and then it'll unfold through the songs. The original release of Quadrophenia came with a set of recording notes for reviewers and journalists that explain the basic story and plot. I would like to get my hands on one of those, but that's not easy to do. The narrative centers on a young working-class mod named Jimmy. He likes drugs, beach fights, and romance, and became a fan of The Who after a concert in Brighton, but is disillusioned by his parents' attitudes towards him, dead-end jobs, and an unsuccessful trip to see a psychiatrist. He clashes with his parents over his usage of amphetamines and his difficulty finding regular work, and doubts his own self-worth, quitting a job as a dustman after only 2 days. Though he is happy to be one of the mods, he struggles to keep up with his peers, and his girlfriend leaves him for his best friend. That's about as big of an ouch as it gets, right? After destroying his scooter and contemplating suicide, he decides to take a train to Brighton, where he'd enjoyed earlier experiences with fellow mods. However, he discovers the ace face who led the gang now has a menial job as a bellboy in a hotel. He feels everything in his life has rejected him, steals a boat, and uses it to sail out to a rock overlooking the sea. On the rock and stuck in the rain, he contemplates his life. The ending is left ambiguous as to what happens to Jimmy. So obviously I've already done all the research for the songs. This is going to play out and a little bit more as we go into it. Background of the album, 1972 was the least active year of The Who since they had formed. They're having problems coming up with a suitable follow-up to Tommy and Who's Next. Those are awfully big shoes to fill, right? They recorded new material with Who's Next collaborator Glenn Johns in May of 72, including Is It In My Head and Love Reign Over Me, which is eventually released on Quadrophenia, and a mini opera called Long Live Rock, Rock is Dead. But the material was considered too derivative of Who's Next, and sessions were abandoned. In an interview from Melody Maker, guitarist and bandleader Pete Townshend said, "I've got to get a new act together. People don't really want to sit and listen to our past, although I would have listened to another album like Who's Next, but Pete didn't ask me, and I was 2 at the time. had become frustrated the group had been unable to find or to produce a film of Tommy. A film version of Tommy would be released in 75, or Lifehouse, the aborted project that resulted in Who's Next, and decided to follow Frank Zappa's idea of producing a musical soundtrack that could produce a narrative in the same way as a film. Unlike Tommy, the new work had to be grounded in reality and tell a story of youth and adolescence that the audience could relate to. Townsend became inspired by Long Live Rock, Rock is Dead's theme, and in autumn of 1972 began writing material. Townsend had met up with Irish Jack Lyons, one of the original Who fans, which gave him the idea of writing a piece that would look back on the group's history and its audience. He created the character of Jimmy from an amalgamation of 6 early fans of the group, including Lyons, and gave the character a 4-way split personality, which led to the album's title, a play on schizophrenia. See, I never knew that until I researched this album. I didn't know what Quadrophenia meant. Unlike other Who albums, Townsend insisted on composing the entire work, as I talked about earlier, though he deliberately made the initial demos sparse and incomplete so the other group members could contribute to the finished product, right? So they had some creativity to fill some stuff in. In the recording, Townsend used the ARP 2500 synthesizer, and several tracks included the instrument overdubbed many times. To illustrate a 4-way split personality of Jimmy, Townsend wrote 4 themes reflecting the 4 members of the Who. These were, and I'll mention it during them, but Bellboy for Moon, Is It Me for Entwistle, Helpless Dancer for Daltrey, Love Over Rain for Pete. 2 lengthy instrumentals on the album, the title track and The Rock, contain the 4 themes separately and together. Who author John Atkins described the instrumental tracks as, quote, the most ambitious and intricate music the group ever undertook. That's a big statement. Most tracks involved each of the group recording their parts separately. The only song arranged by the band in the studio was 5:15, which is the first track. The ARC 2500 was impossible to record in the studio, and changing sounds was cumbersome due to a lack of patches, which required Townsend to work on these parts at home, working late into the night, or more likely into the early morning. To obtain a good string section sound on the album, Townsend bought a cello and over 2 weeks learned how to play it well enough to be recorded. Let's just stop on that for a second. This man bought a cello, learned it in 2 weeks, and it appears on the album, man. You've got to have some talent. I know that seems obvious, but wow. Entwistle spent several weeks during the summer arranging and recording numerous multi-tracked horn parts. Having been forced to play more straightforwardly by Glenn Johns on Who's Next, Moon returned to his established drumming style in Quadrophenia. He contributed lead vocals to Bellboy, where he deliberately showcased an exaggerated narrative style. For the finale of Love Over Rain, Townsend set up a large group of percussion instruments, which Moon played before kicking over a set of tubular bells, which can be heard on the final mix. Assembling the field recordings in the studio was problematic. At one point during I Am the Sea, 9 tape machines were running sound effects. Townsend produced the album single-handedly. In the UK, it reached number 2, being held off the top spot by David Bowie's Pin-Ups. It also reached number 2 in the US, the highest position the Who ever reached with an album, but it was kept off of number 1 from Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Mackenzie and I actually did a reaction to that we have up on the channel. Townsend now considers Quadrophenia to be the last great album that the Who recorded. In 2011, he said the group, quote, never recorded anything that was so ambitious or audacious again. But I mean, when you see how this album was made, that's kind of obvious, right? And implied that it was the last album to feature good playing by Keith Moon. So now we got to understand, before we jump into this, we're about to get into the album, I promise, guys. Now we got to understand a little bit about the mods and rockers, right? Because the mods and rockers were 2 conflicting British youth subcultures of the late 50s to mid to late 60s. Media coverage of mods and rockers fighting in 1964 sparked a moral panic about British youth, and the 2 groups became widely perceived as violent, unruly troublemakers. The rocker subcultures was centered on motorcycling, and their appearance reflected that. Rockers generally wore protective clothing such as black leather jackets and motorcycle boots. The style was heavily influenced by Marlon Brando in The Wild One. The common rocker hairstyle was a pompadour, while their music genre choice was 1950s rock and roll and R&B, played by artists including Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, and Bo Diddley, as well as British musicians of the time such as Billy Fury and Johnny Kidd. The mod subculture was centered on fashion and music, and many mods rode scooters. Mods wore suits and other clean-cut outfits and listened to music genres such as modern jazz, soul, Motown, ska, freakbeat, and British blues-rooted bands like the Yardbirds, the Small Faces, and, yes, the Who. So, which side would you be on, boys and girls? You can see why the 2 sides are about as polar opposite as it can be. We're about to jump into this. All tracks, as already mentioned, but just a reminder, written by Townsend. There's 4 proper sides. I'll note what they are as we get in here, and I'll also note who the lead vocal is on each track. We start off with I Am the Sea, lead vocal by Roger Daltrey. It introduces its setting, which is Brighton, primary character Jimmy, and mood oceanic, amniotic, and majestic. It does not, however, touch on the album's later themes of youth alienation and counterculture. It is the first of 3 songs on the album that prominently feature all 4 of the album's leitmotifs in succession as an overture, the other 2 being Quadrophenia and The Rock. In this instance, the 4 themes represent voices echoing through Jimmy's head. So there we go. This is just an instrumental, so there's going to be no lyrics. It's not very long. Once again, thank you, Arnie, for bringing this, forcing me to tackle this album that I've wanted to do for so long. Let's get after it. Okay, not entirely true, obviously, there's an instrumental. So I'm going to break down for you what's going on here. So you've got Daltrey's The Helpless Dancer, a tough guy, a helpless dancer. Entwistle is Dr. Jimmy, a romantic, is it me for a moment. Keith Moon's The Bellboy, a bloody lunatic, I'll even carry your bags. And Townsend's Love Reign Over Me, a beggar, a hypocrite, love reign over me. That is what it's kind of described on in those notes I found from the album. So when you jump into this, you do hear the waves crashing throughout, which Townsend actually went, it's not a synthesizer trick, even though we love the synthesizer, he actually went and recorded that. You hear the piano, then you hear Townsend whispering real quietly, I am the sea, and Roger Daltrey going, forever, forever. Then you get the French horn, then you get Is It Me for a Moment, that's Entwistle, and then the Bellboy, Bellboy, which is Keith Moon, then the Love Reign Over Me, and then at the very end, Jimmy's asking you, can you see the real me? Can you? Can you? He poses that rhetorical question, which one is really him, as we dive into this album? And he's going to attempt to answer it, I think, in this next track. The real me. Daltrey singing this one. This one describes how Jimmy angrily deals with several individuals to identify the real me. It was released as a single in the US and Canada in '74. The song features an impressive bass performance by Entwistle. According to a 1996 interview with him, the bass part was recorded on the first take. He claimed he was, quote, joking around when he played the part, but the band loved it and used it in the final version. This song serves to set the scene for the listener and introduce them to the story's protagonist, Jimmy. The song sets up the theme of the album by introducing the concept of a split Jimmy. They can't understand or reconcile the various personalities he exhibits at certain stages. A made-up mental disorder, Townsend called, of course, Quadrophenia, the quadrophonic system that they used to record the album, and the 4 personalities that make up Jimmy. It also documents the troubled life he has had up to this point. He visits multiple shrinks and confides in his parents, but no one seems to really understand his condition. So Entwistle is going to be on the bass, but also on the French horns on this. Like I said, Roger's got the lead vocals, and of course Moon on drums and Pete on guitar. The real me, I did like the end, right, where the me, it adds to the Quadrophenia, which some people talk about. The Quadrophenia, the Who obviously being a quartet as well, but some really good lyrics here, really unfolds. Great bass work, but also guitar work. Roger sounds great, Moon sounds great. I mean, this is the Who, man, at their apex, you might argue, coming off of Tommy and Who's Next. I went to the doctor to get another shrink. I sit and tell him about my weekend, but he never betrays what he thinks. Can you see the real me, doctor? Doctor. He wants quick answers, right? But psychiatrists, therapists, Trey's a therapist, they're not going to give you an answer usually on the first visit, right? They got to listen. They got to assess things. I went back to my mother. I said, I'm crazy, Ma, help me. She said, I know how it feels, son, because it runs in the family. Uh-oh. And then he gets in that, can you see? Can you see? Then a little bit of paranoia in the bridge, strange people who know me peeping from behind every window pane. Then you get to this girl who I used to love, was in this yellow house. Yesterday she passed me by, she doesn't want to know me now. And then verse 3, I ended up with the preacher full of lies and hate. So the preacher wasn't very accommodating to him. I seemed to scare him a little, so he showed me to the Golden Gate. So it could be, I don't know what that means. Is the Golden Gate into heaven? Is he trying to show him the way? Or was he showing him to the Golden Gate Bridge, which is famous for, obviously, especially back then, for people jumping off of it, taking their whole life. But I like the way he just finished it off, like I said, with can you see? Can you see the real me? Doctor, mother, can you see the real me? So that's going to take us right into our next track, which, of course, is the instrumental Quadrophenia. It serves as a sort of overture track of the entire album, containing the motifs that would later on be repeated throughout the album. Let's do it. All right, sometimes instrumentals can get boring. This one definitely was not. It was just fantastic. I mean, it was soaring. It had a lot of variation. Hear a little bit of the sea there towards the end. I mean, it's just kind of setting us up, and I think some of this stuff's going to be revisited in future songs. So let's move on to Cut My Hair, where we got Townsend doing the verses and Daltrey doing the chorus, which I always enjoy with these guys when they do that. It was written about Jimmy trying to fit in with the mod lifestyle and realizing the futility in trying to fit in. Cut My Hair. All right, as far as musical wise, I love the Townsend Daltrey track. It really does play out well, the verses chorus switching off. Great guitar work on her, as you would expect. Just everything's good, but the story itself really starts to play out like, why should I care if I have to cut my hair? I got to move with the fashion or be outcast. So, you look back in the 60s and people had long hair. I look at that now and you're like, what are you talking about? But the mods were actually different. They cut their hair short. I know I should fight, but my old man, he's really all right. I'm still living at home even though I won't last. Then the chorus talking about the zoot suit, white jacket with side bends 5 inches long. I'm out on the streets again, and I'm leaping along, which was slang in Britain in the 60s for his high amphetamines, dressed right for a beach fight. And the stuff you hear during the song towards the end is actually from the Brighton riot where the mods and rockers fought. So he was dressed for a beach fight, but I just can't explain why that certain feeling is still here in my brain, some of that quadrophenia, right? Talking about the kids at school, and then and I don't want to hurt them. Mine want me their way. Talking about his parents, I cleaned my room and my shoes, but my mother found a box of blues. Those are the amphetamines as well. And there doesn't seem much hope they'll let me stay. In the chorus again, then verse 3, Jimmy's already going, why am I doing all this, right? Why do I have to be different to them just to earn the respect of a dance hall friend? Have the same old row again and again. Why do I have to move with the crowd of kids that hardly notice I'm around? I work myself to death just to fit in. So he's already going, I don't know, man, is all this worth it to fit in with the mods? And he's like, I'm coming down. So it means he's both coming down to London and he's coming down off the drugs. So got home on the very first train from town. My dad just left for work. He wasn't talking. It's all a game. And inside, I'm just the same. So you feel that quadrophenia. And then you get that news report coming in there that's going to take us into our 5th track. The Punk and the Godfather. It was called The Punk Meets the Godfather in the American version. But we don't care about that, just like we don't care about the Beatles' American versions, right? We got to go with whatever the original was. Daltrey does the verses and the choruses, but Pete does come in and do the bridge on this one. In the song, Jimmy goes to see a mod band perform, only to be disappointed that the band were just part of the mod culture that made up the audience. In the song, Townsend was apparently also trying to understand the roots of The Who, its attraction as a rallying point, and its eventual rejection by such as Jimmy, according to a review in the Rolling Stone. According to Who biographer John Atkins, Jimmy, quote, questions the balance of power that prevails between rock stars and fans. Pete, I found this really good interview with Pete where he talks about a lot of the songs in here. Pete said of the song's lyrics, remember, he wrote them. The hero goes to a rock concert. He queues up, pays his money, and decides he's going to see the stars backstage as they come out the stage door. And one of them comes up and says, F off. And he suddenly realizes there's really nothing really happening in rock and roll. It's just another cross on his list. The song does quote The Who's epic 1965 hit, My Generation. The Punk and the Godfather. It finishes out side 1, by the way, on the traditional album. So you've got it starting off where you've got a punk talk and then a Godfather, then a different punk talk, and back to the first Godfather, a second Godfather, and then we end up with the first punk and the first Godfather, just talking back and forth to each other. I mean, the theme of it is what I talked about at the start when I set the stage about Jimmy going to see the concert and realizing these guys don't care about him that are on the stage. The mods don't care. I'll tell you what, man, this is the first song where the Who like fully shines through, right? The guitar work by Townsend. Entwistle had a great bass song earlier, but his bass song is great, and Moon's drumming, like, you know it's there, man, and only a way that Keith can make it known. In my opinion, Moon and Bonham, the greatest drummers ever. They're 1A, 1B, whatever you want to order, you want to put them in, and then we can have a discussion after that. But really nice, man. Really nice as this story unfolds. Now we'll start off side 2 with the first Townsend lead vocal, I'm One. It is one of the main moments of introspection spread throughout the narrative, and also an indication that Jimmy may not be as mod as he would wish to appear, given the way he asked a fellow mod where he got his clothes. Mods would usually lose face asking another mod where he obtained his clothes from. Pete said in that same interview I said of those songs, lyrical inspiration. When I was a nipper, I felt that the guitar was all I had. I wasn't tough enough to be in a gang. I wasn't good looking enough to be in with the birds. Not clever enough to make it at school. Not good enough on my feet to be a good football player. Or soccer, as we know it here in the States. I was an effing loser. I think everyone feels that way at some point. I do too, man. And somehow being a mod, even though I was too old to be a mod really, I wrote this song with that in mind. Jimmy, the hero of the story, is thinking he hasn't much going for him, but at least he's won. The song features an acoustic opening followed by the rest of the band, excluding Roger joining in. Roger's not on here. Pete's with the lead vocals, guitars, and keyboards, and Whistle on the bass, and Keith on drums. I'm one, a quick one there, no pun intended. Just a different kind of song, though it did build, but man, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the acoustic. I enjoyed Pete's vocal delivery. And, he just tells you every year's the same, and I feel it again. I'm a loser, no chance to win. Leaves start falling, come down is calling. Loneliness starts sinking in. He's painting that picture. But then the chorus, but I'm one. I am one. Somebody's a mod, at least. And I can see that this is me, and I will be. You all see I'm the one. And then he asks that, where do you get your clothes from? Your shoes, all of that. Just right. Then he talks about himself, right? I got a Gibson without a case, a Gibson guitar, but I can't get that even tan look on my face. Ill-fitting clothes, and I blend in the crowd. Fingers so clumsy, voice too loud, but I'm one. So even though I'm all these things, I just have something to identify with, right? Jimmy is identifying at least with the fact he's a mod because he feels like nothing else is going well in his life. Going to come back to a Daltrey lead vocal now, The Dirty Jobs. Jimmy goes to work as a garbage man after rejecting what he sees as the emptiness of working in an office. He discovers the garbage men and other people with dirty jobs are being abused by society. Jimmy is still enough of an idealist to rage against this unfairness, which is a good thing. All right, the dirty jobs. He starts off first being about the man who looks after the pigs, and then he's a man who reveals all he digs. Should be more careful what I say. And then that chorus, I'm being put down, I'm being pushed around, I'm being beaten every day, my life's fading, things are changing, I'm not going to sit and weep again. And then he drives a bus. And then verse 3, my karma tells me, you've been screwed again if you let them do it to you. You've got yourself to blame. It's you who feels the pain. It's you who takes the shame. I'm a young man. I am not done very much. You men should remember how you used to fight. Just like a child, I've been seeing only dreams. I'm all mixed up, but I know what's right. And he gets back into that chorus. And the very outro is, I'm not going to weep again. And then the outro also has a brass band performance of The Thunder by, of course, John Philip Sousa that was recorded at Regent's Park. So we're definitely getting into Jimmy's mindset here. So I like that. Now we get into a song that kind of describes my dancing abilities. Helpless Dancer. I think it might get into a little more than that. This is also Roger's theme. Includes the intro to The Kids Are All Right from my generation. Daltrey sings this one. This one is one of the 4 songs that represent the 4 personalities of Jimmy. This one shows Jimmy as a tough guy, a helpless dancer. All right, you hear that towards the end, the kids are all right. In there, Helpless Dancer. A short song, but a really powerful song. He's like, when a man is running from his boss, who hold the gun that fires cost, and people die from being old or left alone because they're cold, and bombs are dropping on fighting cats, and children's dreams are run with rats. If you complain, you disappear. And then he just goes through that in verse 3. And when a man is trying to change, it only causes further pain. You realize that all along, something in us going wrong. You stop dancing. So the quadrophenia is really starting to set in as Jimmy assesses himself. Now we get to one of the only songs I have absolutely nothing on research-wise. Is It In My Head? You've got Daltrey singing the verses in the bridge, and John Entwistle is going to sing the chorus here. Is it in my head? So now Jimmy, he's starting to go down that road right into the mental illness. He says, I see a man without a problem. I see a country always starved. I hear the music of a heartbeat. I walk and the people turn and laugh. But then he starts asking that question, the chorus, right? Is it in my head? Is it in my head? Is it in my head here at the start? And then is it in my head? Is it in my head? Is it in my head or in my heart? He's not sure. Is he imagining these things? Are they really going on? I pick up phones and hear my history. I dream of all the calls I miss. I try to number those who love me and find exactly what the trouble is. And we get the chorus again. And then verse 3, paranoia is starting to set in, right? I feel I'm being followed. My head is empty. Yet every word I say turns out a sentence. Statements to a stranger just asking for direction turns from being help to being questions. And then the outro is, I see a man without problem. Keyboards on here, as they were in the previous song. I mentioned the previous song. Townsend's in his bag, man. It sounds fantastic. Good horns here also by my man Entwistle. Yeah, just a really good song. Now up to the last track on side 2. I've had enough. Daltrey and Townsend's have this thing, so I guess they just share it. It depicts Jimmy giving up on the idea of fitting in with the mods or anyone else in society, and instead opting to retreat from the world into himself. The cause of this is a series of incidents that pile on his mind until the final straw, when Jimmy sees the girl he loves with his best friend instead of himself. Pete said about the song, a lot happens around this bit, much of it in the album cover story. Briefly, Jimmy snaps when he sees a girl he particularly likes with a friend of his. In a desperately self-pitiful state, he smashes up his prize scooter and decides to go to Brighton, where he had such a good time with his friends, chasing rockers and eating fish and chips. Well, Jimmy's descending, isn't he? I've had enough. Such a good song, man. Just, it really unfolds the story. You were under the impression that when you were walking forward, you end up further onward. But things ain't quite that simple. You get altered information. You were told to not take chances. You missed out on new dances. Now you're losing all your dimples. He's getting older. He's not smiling about it. And then verse 2, my jacket's going to be cut and slim and checked. Maybe a touch of seersucker with an open neck. I ride a GS scooter with my haircut neat. I wear my wartime coat in the wind and sleet. Says this is going to be also in the song and a little bit here, Sea and Sand. So just the way the album all fits together. And the same thing, the last track, track 17, is Love Rain Over Me. This is Love Rain on Me, Rain on Me, Rain on Me. And then the bridge where you get not only a banjo, but you get a Jew's harp coming in here just to show the diversification of the instrumentation on here. I've had enough of living. I've had enough of dying. I've had enough of smiling. I've had enough of crying. I've taken all the high roads. I've squandered and I've saved. I've had enough of childhood graves. Or I've had enough of childhood. I've had enough of graves. And then he gets a job and fights to keep it. Don't cry because you hunt them. Hurt them first, they'll love you. There's a millionaire above you, and you're under his suspicion. Then you get into that verses 2 and 3 again, the jacket cut, and then Love Rain Over Me. But it's interesting in verse 5. So he's just asking, it repeats the Love Rain Over Me, but then we get to verse 5 where he all of a sudden it goes, had enough of dance hills. I've had enough of pills. We're going back into the pills. I've had enough of street fights, which he had mentioned. I've seen my share of kills. I'm finished with the fashions and acting like I'm tough. I'm bored with hate and passion. I've had enough of trying to love. So twice he said love reign over me, but now he's had enough of love I've had enough of trying to love, and that's kind of what that scream, as you kind of feel it, descend down. So that's a good way to finish out that album, that disc, side 1 and side 2. Now we're going to start off side 3 with 5:15. We got Daltrey singing and we got Pete on the intro and the coda. Was released as a single, went to 25 in the UK and 45 in the US in 1979 on the re-release with the Quadrophenia soundtrack. In this song, Jimmy has taken the 5:15 train to Brighton, consumed a lot of drugs, recollecting his life with the mods, and their duels with the rockers. Jimmy's memories are extremely disjointed, consisting mainly of anger, confusion, violence, sexual frustration, and rootlessness. Pete said of this song's lyrics, his train journey down to Brighton, sandwiched between two city gents, is notable for the rather absurd number of Purple Hearts he consumes in order to while away the time. He goes through a not entirely pleasant series of ups and downs as he thinks about the gaudier side of life as a teenager that we see in newspapers like the News of the World. 5:15 was written in Oxford Street and Carnaby Street while I was killing time between appointments. I must try it again sometime. It seems to work. I saw that the whistle heard on the track was recorded after Townsend's driver bribed a British train driver with £5 to sound the train's whistle as it pulled out, despite breaking the station's rules. All right, 5:15. You know, I talked about what it was about at the start. So, I mean, that's kind of how it unfolds. I do want to point out Townsend's guitar work is just fantastic. Ant Whistle on that French horn. And then Chris Stainton was on piano. So he was really good at the start of this on the guitar, because at first I thought Pete was doing double duty mixing in there, but he actually wasn't on the piano or synth there. The chorus, Inside Outside, Leave Me Alone, Nowhere's Home, Where Have I Been, Out of My Brain on the 5:15, Out of My Brain on the train, Why Should I Care, Why Should I Care. So he's starting to just slip into who cares, right? Why should I care? Kind of what he was talking about previously in Cut My Hair. He's really, he's going down to Brighton. He knows he shouldn't care about anything anymore. So let's see how this unfolds. We got Sea and Sand next, with Daltrey and Townsend being credited with vocals. The first song to take place once Quadrophenia's narratives moved to Brighton. It portrays Jimmy's affinity for the beach as an escape from the unpleasant realities of home and life, as well as his memories from past mod gatherings in Brighton. Was singing by both Daltrey and Townsend, slow, dreamy parts and fast, angry parts, and a coda that reprises the early Who single, I'm the Face, Sea and Sand is almost a mini opera unto itself and is one of the album's most characteristic tracks. It's one of 4 of the songs to actually reference the mod movement. It also marks a point of reflection in the narrative. After Jimmy leaves home, he is left on the beach. He reflects about his inadequacy in love and inability to fit in at home or with the other tickets and faces within the mod subculture. It also speaks to Townsend's growing alienation from his band and the music scene as a whole. As such, it serves as a telling sign of the years to come and the state of the Who during and directly after this period. Pete said, arriving in Brighton, Jimmy brightens up a bit. Get the pun? He talks about Rose at home and is a little sarcastic as he recalls the evening on the beach with his former girlfriend. This is 1965 and the mod scene has already fallen apart. And what does he do but go to Brighton just to remember the crazy days when 300,000 mod kids from London descended on that little beach town were only 3 weeks ago. But he's already living in the past. That's insane, man. 300,000. Sea and Sand, what a rocker, right? The guitar work by Townsend, the drumming by Moon in particular, fantastic. When you get into the lyrics, they all start to tie together, right, as they have been here. Here by Sea and Sand, nothing ever goes as planned. I just couldn't face going home. It was just a drag on my own. They finally threw me out. My mom got drunk on stout. My dad couldn't stand on 2 feet as he lectured about morality. So ever since Cut My Hair, right, he's kind of prophesized that he's probably not going to be able to stay because of the pills. And now I guess the family's complete with me hanging around on the street or here on the beach. And talking about his girl, she's a perfect dresser and expects the same out of him. He gets in verse 3, he gives my jacket's going to be cut slim and check. The same exact verse as he had from I've Had Enough. Then he sees her dance across the ballroom, UV light making star shine of her smile. I Am the Face, which is a reference to their song I Am the Face from their High Numbers album in July of 64. Verse 5, so how come the other tickets look much better? It says here a ticket in mod slang was a low echelon mod. And then he just basically says he wants her to be with him. I should have split home at 15. There's a story that the grass is so green. What did I see? Where have I been? Nothing is planned by the Sea and Sand. I'm the face if you want it. So another thing in mod slang, a face is stylish and cool. Now we're going to a very acclaimed song on here, Drown, sang by Daltrey. The band loved to play it live since it was less complex than the other songs from Quadrophenia. Rolling Stone critic Dave Marsh describes the song as among the most interesting on the album. Who biographer John Atkins views the song as having, quote, such purity of essence that it may be the quintessential Quadrophenia performance. He describes it as being simple and direct without needed cleverness, dramatical musical effects, or complex arrangements. It's the oldest song on this album is written as an ode to Mayor Baba in early 1970. Townsend sang it facing the tomb of Baba on his first visit to India in 1972. It tells of how Jimmy contemplates drowning himself in the water in the midst of his disappointment at not being able to see his hero, the ace face. At the end, seagulls, crowd noises, and waves can be heard, along with Pete walking along singing the 6th verse of Sea and Sand. So I guess listen close for that. Pete said, when the tragic hero of Quadrophenia sings it, it is desperate and nihilistic. In fact, it's a love song. God's love being the ocean and ourselves being the drops of water that make it up. Baba said, I am the ocean of love. I want to drown in that ocean. The drop will then be an ocean itself. The piano was borrowed from the song Hitchcock Railway by Joe Cocker. Pete also said when they recorded this song, it rained so hard in Battersea, where our studio is, that the walls were flowing with sheets of water. Chris Stanton played the piano as he did on an earlier track in a booth, and when the take was finished, he opened the door and about 500 gallons gushed out. Another glorious coincidence. That's crazy, man. Well, there was Pete singing the 6th verse to Sea and Sand. He just does such a good job, he does, since he produced this entire album of just setting the scene. I can see why people like this song so much. I don't know that it's one of my favorites on here. I mean, it's really good. It's old school Who. These are the men flying up there fishing, haven't quite enough of the world. I haven't seen quite enough of the world. I ain't seen a sign of my hero, and I'm still diving down for pearls, pearls of wisdom, right? And then the chorus, let me flow into the ocean, let me get back to the sea, let me be stormy, let me be calm, let the tide in and set me free. So his story about Baba, like an honor to him and him wanting to go back to the ocean, kind of like lends clarity to this, but I see how you can plug it into this story. So just a nice rocker, great piano playing from Chris Stanton, and just all around great musicianship, which I'll comment on at the end, but I mean, I guess I can comment on it now. You know, there's an argument in my head of who is the better all-around instrumental group. Is it Zepp, who I mentioned earlier? It's the conversation is Bonham and Moon for the greatest drummers ever, and I think it stops there. I mean, you may think differently, and I get that. And then you get into just comparing everybody else, right? Is it John Paul Jones, or is it John Entwistle? Is it Pete Townsend, or is it Jimmy Page? Is it Robert Plant? Is it Roger Daltrey? Like, you see, like, of the rock bands, for me, I'm going to edge on the side of The Who. I know most people would edge on the side of Zepp, but this is just another example of this album of musicianship at its finest. And speaking of the great Keith Moon, now we're up to Bellboy, which is Keith's theme, which has Daltrey and Keith Moon. Besides the main vocals by lead singer Roger Daltrey, the song features vocals by drummer Keith Moon, most of whose relatively few vocals for the band dated from the 60s. Moon mostly talks or sings his lines in a cartoonish voice with an exaggerated Cockney accent. However, the bridge and the last line are sung in his natural voice. The shouts of Bellboy are the lines of Jimmy from the disgusted realization of what the ace face actually was, symbolic of the theme of disillusionment throughout the album. Lyrically, this is a final straw for Jimmy, having just found out that the ace face he had looked up to as a mod was now a bellboy working for everyone rather than ruling over everyone at the same Brighton hotel the mods had smashed up back in 1963. He even says in there, I don't suppose you would remember me, but I used to follow you back in 63. The previous lines, ain't you the guy who used to set the paces, riding up in front of 100 faces, refers to the 100 Faces, a fan club set up by the Who's managers Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp to promote the group in their early days. In the short story written by Townsend, the album's original liner notes, it's explained that Jimmy never thought he'd be let down by being a mod, given everything else had let him down. Pete said of the song's meaning, quote, he meets an old ace face who's now a bellhop at the very hotel the mods tore up, and he looks on Jimmy with a mixture of pity and contempt, really, and tells him, in effect, look, my job sucks and my life is a tragedy, but you? Look at you. You're dead. All right, man. Bellboy. Yeah, Keith's, when he's singing that exaggerated accent, is funny. But I mentioned it during the song. I'm trying to talk during the songs, guys. It's because it's distracting. But I did just jump in there for a second. Say, Keith, when he was actually singing his verse, he sounded pretty darn good. But it is just a story unfolding of Jimmy sees this guy, and he's like, wait a minute. Don't I know you? Didn't you used to be this? And the guy's kind of telling him stuff, the ace face. And at the end, the ace face tells him, people often change. When I look in your eyes, you can learn a lot from a life like mine. The secret to me, it ain't flown like a flag. I can carry it behind this bleeding little badge. So he's basically telling him, hey, learn from me, right? Learn from me. And don't make the same mistakes I did. Go ahead and jump out of this life. And once again, just fantastic instrumentation all the way around. Daltrey, I'm not mentioning him enough. Daltrey's a great lead vocalist. I like him a lot. I think sometimes he's undersold in rock history about what a great vocalist, lead vocalist he was. So now we're going to go to the longest song on the album. It starts off side 4. We got Dr. Jimmy. Now, I don't know what Dr. Jimmy, I know what Dr. Roberts, and he could hook you up if you needed to, but I don't know what Dr. Jimmy. It contains It Is Me. It is John's theme. Daltrey sings it in the story arc of Quadrophenia. This is the lowest point for Jimmy. Up until now, everything he cared about or relied upon is slowly abandoning him. His parents have kicked him out. His girlfriend dumped him. He took a ton of drugs. The mods have by and large kind of ceased to exist. And he can't hold down a job. All of which leads to this, an implosion. He goes for a drug reset, giving up on Jimmy and all pretenses of decency and all his attempts to hold his life together. He becomes the Hyde to his Jekyll, releasing all the pent-up anger, frustration, and despair in a wave of violence and depravity. This leads into, after there's going to be an instrumental, and then Love Reign Over Me, the redemption, where he comes to terms with himself. All right, Dr. Jimmy. Dr. Jimmy, just an epic song that probably wouldn't get made today because they'd get canceled with some of the lyrics in there, even though it's just part of showing the depravity of Jimmy, right, to where he's just going, he's tired of trying. So when people get tired of trying, sometimes they just either withdraw on themselves or they just decide to go completely to the other side. I think Jimmy's doing a little bit of both here. But the hook is, what is it? I'll take it. Who is she? I'll rape it. Got a bet there. I'll meet it. Getting high. You can't beat it. And then he just kind of goes on the course. Dr. Jimmy and Mr. Jim, when I'm piled, you don't notice him. He only comes out when I drink my gin. So that is kind of That is kind of the theme here of the bridge. Is it me for a moment? The stars are falling, the heat is rising, the past is calling. Is it me for a moment? I'm going back home, or I'm going back soon, home to get that baboon who cut up my eye, tore up my Levi's. I'm feeling restless. Bring another score around. Maybe something stronger could really hold me down. Then back into that hook and chorus. And they finish with that bridge again. Is it me for a moment? So you really feel the descension of where he's going and descending down into the very depths of depravity and human condition. Now we're going to go to the rock. It's an instrumental. At this point in Quadrophenia, Jimmy boats out to the sea and soon ends up stranded on a rock, a very small island just off the coast. The rock, which I probably should have done Love Reign Over Me at the same time, because I know it just leads right into it, but just a good song that builds, has nice crescendos in there, kind of takes you on a journey. So now we go to the final track, a song that we actually reacted to a few years ago. I don't even remember it. Everyone was saying this was the best song on here, but taken out of context, I don't know about any of these songs, how you can really truly appreciate them, but I'll talk about that at the end. So the last one, here we are. Love Reign Over Me, Pete's theme. Daltrey sings it. Single in the U.S. only went to 76. This song, along with Is It In My Head, date back to 72. Both songs were originally intended to be part of the unreleased autobiographical album Rock is Dead, Long Live Rock, that later evolved into this album. Lyrics concern Jimmy having a personal crisis with nothing left to live for. He finds a spiritual redemption in pouring rain. Pete described the song, or refers to Mayor Baba's one-time comment that rain was a blessing from God, that thunder was God's voice. It's another plea to drown, only this time in the rain. Jimmy goes through a suicide crisis. He surrenders to the inevitable, and you know when it's over and he goes back to town, he'll be going through the same stuff, being in the same terrible family situation and so on. But he's moved up a level. He's weak still, but there's a strength in that weakness. He's in danger of maturing. Okay, Love Reign Over Me. Okay, that may be the best song on this album. You feel Roger's power in his vocals, his emotion, and the way it's read. The piano intro I thought was great. I thought it lent a softness to it, a kind of a change in the story, knowing that maybe Jimmy's having a difference, a change of heart, and that's kind of what happens here. This first one, only love can make it rain. The way the beach is kissed by the sea, only love can make it rain. Like the sweat of lovers laying in the fields. And then love, reign over me, R-E-I-G-N. So reign over me. Rain over me, the rain from the sky. Love, rain over me, rain over me. So he interchanges the two. Only love can bring the rain that makes you yearn to the sky. Only love can bring the rain that falls like tears from on high. And then the chorus, and then the bridge on the dry and dusty road. The nights we spend apart alone. I need to get back home to cool, cool rain. I can't sleep, and I lay and I think. The night is hot and black as ink. Oh God, I need a drink of cool, cool rain of the love, right? And then an instrumental break, the chorus, and then the very outro where he just says love. So I think it's cool because Jimmy's had this personal crisis. He's been through all of this stuff. He goes out and he's out in the rain, he's out in the sea, and he decides, you know what? I'm going to push into love. And as Pete said, he's going to go back to his normal life, but now he's been through a little bit, right? I think he can deal with it a lot better. All right, now we get to my favorite tracks, which is always weird on an album like this. I almost didn't do favorite tracks, but I always do. So let's do them. Honorable mention, there's going to be a lot on here, right? There's 17 tracks. Honorable mention, The Real Me, Cut My Hair, 515, Sea and Sand, Drowned, Dr. Jimmy. Faves, The Punk and the Godfather, I'm One, I've Had Enough, and Love Reign Over Me. Now we get to my overall score, but before I get to that, I got a lot of things to say here, and I know, guys, you've been with me for a long time, right? Of recording time before I edit it, we're over 2 hours here. So, but it's a great album. It's a long album, and I got a lot to say in between songs. So appreciate you hanging in there with me, hanging there for just a little bit longer, because I got to point out, and I did it throughout the video, but the instrumentation on this, right? Daltrey's voice, as I said, is very underrated. Then you got Pete putting in the work. Townsend, number one, producing this whole thing, writing this whole thing, unbelievable. Guitar work, fantastic. He's on the synths. He's on the cello that he taught himself how to play. He's on the piano. It's just tremendous stuff. Then you got, he's also on the banjo. And then you got Entwistle, obviously on the bass, but also on the horns. and then his vocals in there. Chris Stanton on piano on the Dirty Jobs 515 and Drowned. You know when he's on there because it's just a little bit different than when Pete's on those. You can just tell someone who's really, really skilled at it is on there. And then we got to talk about Moon. Like, Moon's drumming on here is unbelievable. Like, you guys know this if you watch this channel time. I listen to a ton of music, right? I hear all kinds of great musicians. It's been a long time since I've listened to The Who. And when you go in and listen to somebody like I said, there's a lot of great musicians, but when you listen to somebody who's like up here, like it's just a whole different level. You know it as soon as you hear it. Like, I knew it from the first song, that first instrumental. Like, you just know it. And throughout the album, like, Moon's drumming is absolutely next level. So get all that out of the way. Another thing that comes to me, we reviewed The Wall on the channel. And, it was back when we were doing reviews and weren't listening to the music. But it was I remember it took me forever. Because reviews in some ways are harder than reactions. And the reviews, we just tell you all about the songs and give our opinions. And although the videos are shorter, obviously, they're a little bit more complex to do. And it took forever to do. And it was in 2 parts to really tell the story. So I find a natural comparison between The Wall and Quadrophenia. And I know people come down, very strongly on one side or the other. I'll tell you, I'm very strongly on the Quadrophenia side. This album is fantastic. Nothing against The Wall, but this album is just tremendous. And I think what makes it stand out over something like The Wall is, as I already mentioned, the musicianship, right? The musicianship is just phenomenal. Pete did a fantastic job writing this thing. I mean, it's not only an album, it's a story, man, but it's a story that works, right? It's not so artsy that you don't enjoy the songs, because the songs are really, really good on their own, but you don't really appreciate them unless you listen to them in this broad context. So overall on this album, and I've very rarely given a grade this high on first listen. I've done it maybe once or twice. But overall grade is going to have to be a 9.25. Like, that's how good this album is. It is absolutely phenomenal. I wanted to do this album justice. I hope I did. I take everything we do very seriously, but I take things like this very, very seriously. This album is seminal in rock history. Seminal for The Who, who's one of the best rock bands of all time, if not the best rock band of all time. Thank you, Arnie, for bringing this one and forcing me to really dive deep into this. It has been a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Let me know what you think of this album, where it stands up in rock lore. What's better, this or Tommy? I've never heard Tommy either. Or Who's Next? How do you feel about this against the wall? Give me some of your thoughts down below. Like I said, thanks for hanging in with me. And until next time, guys, I will see you.